In this session today, we will discuss the difference between research paradigms, research approaches, research methodologies, and research methods. So in the end of this session, you will be able to tell the difference between these concepts, and especially you will be able to know, to have a broad overview of which are the methods available in social science for you to use. You will start looking or identifying some of their strengths or limitations, but more importantly, you will start identifying research design. So far, we already discussed several research like Yaya Creams or the other researcher we had here that she was looking into neurocorrelates. So we already discussed some designs here, and now it is time for you to start identifying specific methods that correspond to each one of them. So to start today, I would like to ask you, what is your experience with quantitative and qualitative research? I would like to know your perspective, if you have performed them, or what is your like general overview of these two approaches.
Very little. I would need a basic briefing on what the difference is.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Hans?
Yeah, I did some stuff, some qualitative, some interviews, very little though, like a couple, and some like transcribing of that and distilling some ideas, and quantitative more. I did in a data science a couple of for 2 years. There we like collected like reports mainly about crime for the government, and we did some basic analyses on that, like mostly correlational stuff.
Okay. And what is your opinion on these different methods? Like, do you have a preference, or did you
Well,
enjoy performing qualitative research?
both have their benefits and downsides, of course. Like qualitative research is better to get to the details, to get to the nuances. You can ask more, you can get more information. And like quantitative is more limited in my experiences. It has to be like measurable and operable, and like it misses out on a lot of details, but it is easier to process and to do calculations with and to do analyses with, a lot easier. So
Yeah.
I think I prefer quantitative for that reason, mainly because you can also take into account a lot more data.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Hans. And well, you obviously have experience conducting both kind of research. And how is for the rest of you? Do you have a particular viewpoint on these different approaches?
Well, again, could you give us first a brief rundown what the difference is?
Yeah, of course. So
Okay.
technically, this is the nature of our session today. I just wanted to catch the first the first attitudes you had towards one or the other. So I'm doing this because usually quantitative research has a major stage and is mainstream, and often, especially in psychology, uh, qualitative research has a bad reputation. So I just wanted to know where you were standing, but we can discuss this. We can discuss more about this after this session, and then I'm sure you will be able to answer better this question that I'm giving you. Okay, so in this line, I would like to start today's sessions, and I would like to start today telling you about this.
I think Catherine had something, or she raised her And
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks.
thank you.
Thanks. Just briefly, I don't know too much about I know probably about as much as Hans, as Hans about as Hans about the methods, but since you invited initial impressions, and since we're going on to say that qualitative research is probably not as highly regarded, I just want to say that what I know about them, I much prefer qualitative, and I'm very suspicious of quantitative because of some of the things Hans was mentioning, that you have to cram things into pre-labeled, pre-measured categories. And that makes a lot of nuances get lost that might actually be very important. So I just wanted to, since I thought maybe you were going to challenge this kind of way of thinking, I wanted just to say I'm kind of on that page as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I'm actually in the same page that you. Obviously, I will try to be not be that biased, but I will try to give you a broad overview. But I am definitely in the same line that you were just discussing. Sometimes, for the sake of simplicity, or also because it's faster to conduct quantitative research. This is why sometimes qualitative research is just too expensive, and you need so many resources just to go through interviews. It's like typing them, then coding them. It's just a lot, and a lot of researchers they say, well, I don't have that much money, like I cannot do this kind of research, and but obviously this shouldn't be in the way of scientific knowledge, right? So this is one of the things we will be discussing today. So I would like to start today's sessions with this story. Uh, I find it really interesting because it challenged the opinion of a lot of people that believe that fancy research methodologies or ways or getting information are just better just because have like have more technology on it, or it's more objective in some way, and sometimes it is not the case. So I wanted to tell you this. In the 1980s, Chinese archaeologists were looking for a lost tomb in a small Chinese village. They were doing this after finding small terracotta army warriors, and these warriors obviously were suspected to be protecting the king. So because they found the warriors, they were thinking, near here, it must be a tomb that we don't know about. So they use a, different methods trying to find this tomb, and they spend years and years looking for it. And in 1988, they hire some geologists, and they use ground penetrating radar in order to find cavities in the rock in order to find the tomb. And they actually did find something. They found a cavity, and like the main archaeologist was so excited that even though the cavity was under a house and he wasn't able to dig because he didn't own the house, he was so excited about this new technology, and being able to look through the rock and find this void. And he actually purchased the house in order to be able to dig. So it wasn't a successful dig. After 1 meter, they hit a hard rock, and the tomb wasn't there. And obviously, he was disappointed, but he didn't give up. Uh, Many more years passed after this in 1988, but he, like other archaeologists, also failed to find the tomb. But he wanted to continue looking for the tomb, like even like 6 years after that. And he returned to some older methods trying to locate the tomb. And he was basically walking around the village and listening to stories of local events. So people were actually calling him the tomb seeking guy, it was like he was already part of the community because it was already so many years there, and he was always talking to people and trying to learn about their lives in their and their stories they had to share. And one day he heard something about a cellar, a sweet potato cellar that someone built. And he knew in that moment, because he had previous experience with this kind of cellars from that village, and from his own village, he knew these kind of cellars should be at least 2 meters deep. And he was saying, like, if most of the village is in such a narrow uh, earth before hitting rock, so maybe this cellar was built in the amount of earth that people left after building the tomb. So he went there to this place, and he started digging just with the shovel. And he was so happy because after 2 meters, he was still shoveling earth. So at the end, the tomb. He found the tomb with this kind of methodology he used. So he was using ethnographic research. And this is a kind of qualitative research where you go there, become one with the community, and start sharing and listening to their stories. And you get some additional information that you may not get with some other more quantitative methods. So I don't know, I think this is interesting, and I wanted to share this story with you to see that not always the newest technology will give us a better understanding of reality or will be the best way to answer our research question. So once I said that, we will start talking about research paradigms. And obviously, we will start talking about belief systems. Here, we must ask ourselves, what kind of reality I believe exists? Is it one singular verifiable reality and truth, or is it more socially constructed in multiple realities? So this is two kinds, for example, of realities that may exist. And we should also ask ourselves, what is the nature and form of knowledge that I believe exists? Um, and we should ask ourselves about the possibility and desirability of objectivity, subjectivity, causality, validity, and generalization. So here we are talking specifically about ontology and epistemology, and we are already diving into research paradigms, which you have here in your screen a small definition. A paradigm is a basic belief system and theoretical framework with specific assumptions about ontology, epistemology, and methodology. So in order for you to really understand the methods that you can use in the social sciences, you must understand the paradigms that we have supporting these methods. This is why we are discussing this today. So you must know that ontology and epistemology are to research what footings are to a house. They form the foundations of the whole edifice. So they are really, really important. Sometimes they go implicitly in the papers, but actually, I believe that they should be thought of more careful, because sometimes we are making some assumptions and we are using specific methods, like for example, questionnaires or surveys, and it is conflicting with the kind of research questions that we are planning. So we have to be really aware of the need of having this kind of background in research. So different paradigms may emphasize different types of assumptions, of methods, and data about the nature of reality. and researchers must identify the one that better suits their research question. So this is very important. How do you pick the best research method? It doesn't depend on which one is the more likely to be published. It shouldn't depend on which one you are more knowledgeable about and you are more comfortable using. It should depend on the research question and the nature of the phenomena that you are trying to investigate. So this is really important for you to be aware of. Well, and now that we know that these paradigms are really providing the footings of research methods, you have here that to the major paradigms we have in social sciences, social sciences are these three, are positivism and neopositivism, we have constructivism, and we have critical theory. So these three are the main ones. And to each one of them, they belong specific approaches in research. For example, for positivism and neopositivism, the belonging approach is quantitative, and for interpretivism or constructivism is qualitative research. And for critical theory, there we can find specific frameworks like transformative approach with participatory action research, especially focus in this kind of research. So as you can see here, this is basically two approaches, which are quantitative and qualitative approaches. And we also have a tier one, which is mixed method approach, which is obviously using a bit of both. And a lot of new research we are looking at to be like this, like mixed approaches are trying to walk the bridge between the limitations on these two kinds of approaches. So you already know that quantitative approach, the paradigm we have behind is no positivism, while qualitative approach we have a more constructivist and interpretivist paradigm behind. So for those of you that may not have a lot of experience with this kind of theoretical frameworks, which I don't think, like I didn't thought about going deeper into ontology and epistemology, because obviously I know you already make a clear distinction among them, but still I wanted to show you how these kind of perspectives really are feeding the way we conduct research. And this is why in this chart, you can already see the differences between the main two approaches, which are quantitative and qualitative. So for example, in a quantitative approach, reasoning is logistic and deductive. We get to knowledge through deductive reasoning. And in qualitative approach is dialectic and inductive. For example, the nature of knowledge in quantitative research is objective, while in qualitative research is actually subjective. It depends on the view of the subjects. They are constructing the reality. So here in this chart, you can easily see the differences among them. For example, for qualitative research, context, all the knowledge and all the phenomena are context dependent. So what is happening around the participant, it's making an influence in the phenomena, while is the opposite in quantitative research. And they believe reality is just is subjective, is out there. I can go measure it and it will be the same everywhere, right? So this is the kind of difference between this kind of research. And also methodologically, you can find specific things. For example, quantitative research should be highly controlled. Like this is why experimental settings are really important, because you want to control other variables in order to be unbiased to capture what is actually happening in an objective way. But for example, in qualitative research, this is more flexible, and they say, no, it may not be valid how they do it in quantitative research, because if you want to capture a specific cognitive process, but you have someone in a lab, like connected to a computer, looking at words in a screen, is not the same environment that if they were actually in school and receiving some specific social feedback that they may react in a specific way. So they say, if it's not natural, the information you are gathering is not valid, right? So this is the kind of differences between these two approaches. So context dependent, one is more flexible than the other. And one other thing, like what quantitative research, they believe that things are as they are. The facts has a specific composition. They are value-free, unbiased, right? It's just what it is. And in qualitative research, they are accounting for things actually being constructed by the participants and being biased and being loaded of a specific experiences in that participant. Another methodological difference is, as I am saying it right now, in quantitative research, we call people subjects of the study. And in qualitative research, you must say participants of this study, because they treat the relationship between subject and object differently, right? So basically, these are the main differences between these two. But like many specific details regarding methodological designs are different between these two approaches. For example, in quantitative research, because you are trying to draw generalization and you need to apply statistical analysis, so you need a specific sample size. You need power, right? You need that the sample it's large enough for you to make these assumptions. So in qualitative research, the sample size is not an issue. And sometimes you just want to go deeper into the phenomena and not gathering as much people, but getting as much information for a small amount of people, right? So of course, this is a broad overview between quantitative and qualitative research. I left you some readings in Moodle, just in case you want to go deeper, but still we can continue discussing the differences between them. But one thing that you should and you must really know, it's about the methods that are specific for each one of these approaches. So as I already mentioned it, we have three major paradigms that are providing footing for three major approaches. So we have quantitative approach, we have qualitative approach, and we have mixed methods, right? So mixed methods is just using both. So this is what is regard to paradigms and approaches. Now, what about the corresponding methodologies? So I gave you here a small definition of what is a methodology, and it's basically a strategy or a plan of action or the process or the design that will inform your choice of particular methods. And then we will also discuss which kind of methods correspond to each kind of approach. So here is really important for you to know about this. Quantitative approach has these methodologies. We have experimental, we have non-experimental, we have meta-analysis, we have structural equation modeling, and we have statistical modeling. all of them within quantitative research. For experimental research, for example, we have pure experiment, we have pre-experiments, we have quasi-experiments, right? In non-experimental research, we have another variety. We have survey research, we have correlational research. It can be also be considered there. And we will know all of them in the following sessions, because we will be discussing in depth these kind of methodologies that we have in quantitative design. So the methodologies are different for qualitative approaches. So there, the methodologies are based on phenomenology, ethnography, grounding theory, ethnomethodology, biography, and participatory action research. So you already can start making specific distinction among these two big approaches. And it is really important for you to start having them in mind and to start using them. I would like you to start making these kind of distinctions every time that someone is presenting you with a study. Start thinking about it. Is this quantitative? Is this qualitative? Is it experimental? Is it non-experimental, right? For example, for Dr. Kisler that we had here in the neural correlates of social feedback, in his case, he was using quantitative approach in an experimental setting, right? And now we will see about the methods, because we have a broad array of methods that we can use in each one of these designs. So this is the distinction. Now the methods are the specific techniques, the specific procedures we use to gather data. In a quantitative approach, we have questionnaires, surveys, experiments, behavioral observation, physiological measures, psychometric testing, right? And for a qualitative approach, the methods are different because the nature of reality is different. So there we have interviews, focus group, observation, document analysis, and narrative research. So in the example that I was making before with Dr. Kisler, she was using in an experimental setting, and she was using physiological measures, right? Because we already know she was looking at the neural correlates. Okay, so this is basically the difference between approaches, between paradigms, approaches, methodologies, and methods. So another thing that you have to be really clear about is defining the nature of your research, or the scope of your research, or the aim of your research. So here, different authors name this distinction differently, but I already gave you 3 different conceptions. So it can be here scope, aims, of nature of research. So in this case, you must know that according to your aims, your research can be exploratory, descriptive, or explanatory. So, and this applies to both, to quantitative and qualitative research. So, exploratory research aims to explore a research problem or topic that is relatively uncharted or not well understood, when you don't have enough information about the phenomena. And then you should conduct exploratory research instead of putting some name or picking some variables that you believe must explain this phenomena. Like, you should conduct exploratory research and find out what is actually happening with the phenomena. Its primary goal is to gain an insight, to generate ideas, and to develop a better understanding of the phenomena. So in an initial stage, if you don't have a lot of information about your topic of interest, like, exploratory research should be the first one that you should perform. Well, this is we in this point we go once again to hegemonic practices in research, And sometimes exploratory research is not really well seen out there because it's an early stage and people is often jumping into descriptive research and trying to make some hypotheses with variables that they believe may explain the phenomena, but they are missing an important step. And then when the analysis, the statistical analysis are not giving you the kind of information that you were expecting, and then you are in a big problem, right? This is because you didn't conduct research in the way it should be. For example, descriptive research seeks to describe and to portray the specific characteristics, behaviors, or condition of a specific population, event, phenomena, or group. So it's about describing them. Uh, it wants to provide a snapshot of the current state of affairs, and it can be used to identify patterns, trends, or correlations among the variables that could be there, the variables or the categories, because also applies to qualitative research. So the more advanced kind of research is explanatory research, because here you are supposed to already know the basics of the elements that are present, because you already conducted exploratory research, and then you already know how these elements behave and how they correlate among each other, what kind of patterns they form, because you already conducted descriptive research, and now you are ready to build an explanation, trying to go beyond the description and really understanding the underlying mechanisms and reasons behind the patterns that you are observing. So this is higher order research, explanatory research, and it is important for you to know these three big natures of research, because your research, either it is a systematic review, it will have one of these scopes or aims. So you must identify in each study that you came across, is this aim exploratory? Is this descriptive? Is it explanatory? Is it enough? The information that they are providing is enough for this kind of a scope that they are reaching for? This is the kind of questions that you want to ask you in order to really understand research. Obviously, you should always also ask about the specific methods they are using. Were they the best choice to answer this specific research question? Could it be done in a better way? Maybe not limiting the variables too much. Maybe using a different kind of questionnaire. I don't know. But this kind of things is the kind of knowledge that you should have regarding research methodologies and to better understand research. Okay, so I also wanted to share with you some of the attempts that has been done in personality research, trying to build a bridge between these big two approaches, or these two big paradigms, right? About the nature of reality, or the nature of the knowledge, how we can actually acquire and capture what is actually happening. So a good bridge has been done already in personality. A lot of researchers are aware of nomothetic and idiographic research. So, for example, in nomothetic research aims to identify general laws and principles that apply to all individuals. For example, in personality psychology, we will be talking here about, let's say, the Big Five questionnaire, this kind of traits that they are trying to find in everyone, and they are the same across the cultures. So this kind of research is nomothetic and is more in line with a quantitative approach. But for example, they are aware about an ideographic approach. And this kind of research tries to better understand the unique characteristics and experiences of the individuals, right? So they are already building the bridge between quantitative and qualitative. And I left you here the clear limitations of each one of these approaches, so you start to build in your mind exactly how these methods can actually help you to answer the research question of your interest, but at the same time, how to better overcome the limitations or the weakness of each of these methods. And this is why, obviously, recently a lot of people is going towards mixed methods because they are trying to overcome these limitations. So, for example, here, limitations for the nomothetic approach, they may overlook individual uniqueness and variations, or they may not capture the complexity and richness of individual experiences, or they may not fully account for cultural or contextual differences in personality. So the limitations that we can find in ideographic research is that the findings may not be easily generalizable to larger population. And also, as I already mentioned at the beginning, they can be time consuming and subjective. So these are the limitation of each one of this. And another attempt made on personality, trying to build a bridge between these two paradigms that we have and these two big views of reality. It's the personality person situation research, which aims to provide a better understanding of human behavior by considering the complex interplay between personality traits and situational factors. So here they are taking into account the context. Even though they are using a quantitative approach in order to understand specific differences in personality, which are traits, but at the same time, they are already trying to account contextual elements that may influence the behavior, right? So I wanted to tell you this so you have it in mind, and I'm sure we will be discussing most about them, maybe with Marcos around. But for today, the thing that you must keep in your mind is that there is no good or bad research methods. There is no better or worse. It's just selecting the right method for your specific research question. This is the key of using the methods properly. And how can you do this? How can you select it? So I left you here this kind of ideas. Uh, you may want to ask yourself about the properties of your phenomena of interest. What am I trying to unveil? What kind of reality is this? And how can I actually better capture which paradigm may allow me to better capture this phenomena? And then asking yourself, what is the state of the art regarding this kind of phenomena? What is already out there? Conducting a systematic review or any kind of review, but if it's systematic, it's even better. Also, you may want to ask yourself, which gaps do you identify? So what is lacking in this kind of research? What is there that other people haven't looked at? And then you can propose something specific to research about this phenomena. So this is really important to do before conducting research. And this is something that you must know and always ask about when you are reading any kind of paper or research or study. You must really find congruence among these paradigms, approaches, methodologies, and methods. Okay? So basically, this is what I wanted to share with you today. And if you have some thoughts or questions, we can dive in. Yeah, Catherine?
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Gina. I found that really interesting, and that really helped me kind of fill in a lot of gaps in my kind of philosophy of science understanding of how psychology works. Just looking for a couple questions I wrote down. Okay, one is, could you say more? Okay, so one question is about the difference between exploratory research and descriptive research. I didn't quite clock what the difference is, and so and maybe an example of maybe an example of the two different kinds might help. One specific question that I had about the difference is the difference between them a difference in kind, or is it more a difference of degree, like we just know more about the phenomenon in descriptive research, whereas we just know less about it in exploratory research? There is a really difference in kind between them.
Yeah, I will have to say it is different in kind. So in exploratory research, you are open to any kind of variable that may be there. So you don't know, and you are not making assumptions. You are not presupposing what is happening in the phenomena. You are just using specific methods, like for example, interviews, if you are using qualitative research, but also free listing and pile sorting, which are specific quantitative methods in cognitive anthropology that can be used for exploratory research. So in exploratory research, you are completely open-minded and you are not already devising specific variables that can influence the phenomena. So the result may surprise you because you don't know where you're going to find. Whether in a descriptive research, like this is because there is more information out there, maybe some other people already conducted exploratory research, which should be the way. But some other times, a lot of research is just started without exploratory research. It's just a researcher thinking that, you know what, I think that personality growth has to do with coping mechanisms. So let's see what coping styles will do in a specific situation regarding growth, and they may have or not have previous information about it, but they already have a variable, so that it will be descriptive research. So this is the difference between exploratory and descriptive. In descriptive, you are completely open and you don't have specific variables or categories. So you are open to whatever you are going to find out there.
Okay, thanks. Can I briefly follow up?
Yeah.
So the outcome of exploratory research is not necessarily a variable. Descriptive research, do you start with variables that have already been invented, or is the job that you have to invent to come up with variables or to come up with so is the purpose of descriptive research to come up with variables?
That will be the purpose of exploratory research.
Oh, okay. So exploratory research would be, so in other words, the output of exploratory research would be, hey, here are some variables that affect this phenomenon or that might affect this phenomenon.
Exactly.
So does exploratory research start with hypotheses, or is it so open that you don't even start with hypotheses?
No. You cannot start with a hypothesis, and hypotheses are highly quantitative. Even though you are conducting descriptive research in qualitative, with a qualitative approach, you are not starting with a hypothesis, because the hypothesis includes that you are using deduction, right? You have a specific theory and you build an hypothesis and you gather the data and you test the hypothesis. So this is specific for a quantitative approach. So it doesn't start with a hypothesis.
Okay,
it starts with a research question, which is open. It's not closed.
Okay, so that's actually news to me that hypotheses are specifically quantitative.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe some more, maybe, I mean, I don't want to kind of hog the time. Maybe some examples would help because it's just interesting because even when we write like project proposals in philosophy, they want hypotheses because it kind of looks scientific. And we're kind of like, how can we come up with a hypothesis about a philosophical theory? So we have to kind of shoehorn our philosophical ideas, like, do we have free will? My hypothesis is that it's absolutely ridiculous. And so my assumption was just that there always has to be some kind of hypothesis in social and natural science. So I'm kind of interested in how you would go about doing qualitative research, for example, without starting with a hypothesis that then you use the interviews to confirm or disconfirm.
Yeah, definitely. This thing that you are sharing, Catherine, is precisely one of the contradictions that we find trying to conduct research currently, because once again, hegemonic practices are driving us in a specific way, but sometimes this is contradictory, right? It doesn't make sense, but somehow you need to look more scientific and you need to use these specific methods in order to portray your thoughts and make people believe that you are systematically observing reality and not just making assumptions. So if you go deep into the paradigm, for example, in order to describe social phenomena or personality, which are highly subjective and context dependent, you need a different kind of framework, like like a qualitative approach. So the way they go here is that they are calling them differently. They don't call them hypotheses. They call them assumptions. And they are similar to hypotheses because they want you to share that you have a specific direction, right? That you are going in a certain way and that you are going to do systematic observation of the phenomena in this direction. It's like watching you that you are doing the right thing. But even though we use assumptions in qualitative research, and they are, any researcher will tell you, it is more open, it is not as close as an hypothesis. A hypothesis should be rejected or accepted. And qualitative research, an assumption is open and can change through the research and also at the end. So they portray it as more flexible but still directed. But somehow, epistemologically, it doesn't make complete sense, because then it has to do with how you are describing reality. And if you are already predisposed to see a specific pattern, it may be more likely that you see this pattern. So there you are a bit biased. So this is where I see some issues with the way we are trying to push science ahead. And this is the reason of this is, as already mentioned before, hegemonic practices is the way to make your research look more scientific, to look more you are using the latest technology, the latest analysis. Is the same in statistics. In statistics, you want to keep yourself like making the best models and using, the best software, the newest, and it is more likely for you to get published if you do this. So this is what happened there. Okay, so we can go to I think Hans next.
Sure. Thank you for this. I had a question pertaining to like bias and qualitative research. Like I often get the impression that qualitative research is more prone to various biases, especially selection bias, also various biases in the researcher because you're closer to the participant, whereas there's more distance in quantitative research, which seems to give it some edge. would there be some way like to mitigate those effects of bias in qualitative research, like to make it on par with quantitative research? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. This could be an issue, and this is why qualitative methodology should be more stringent than quantitative methodology, because you have to be careful with this kind of things, and you must one thing that you must assume that you are making an impression in the participant. The mere fact that you are there has a specific effect. And in quantitative research, you may just not assume it. You assume, like, I don't know this person, like, I don't care about their answers. It's like, I assume the measure will be objective and nothing will happen. So in this case, qualitative researchers, they believe they are less naive, and they are trying to account for the kind of influence that you are making while measuring, right? While asking them, while conducting the interview. So here is awareness, hence the thing that give you the edge in qualitative research, and you should always consider it, and you should take it into consideration while you are coding, even while you are coding, because like also you can be a little bit bias free if you use different researchers, right? Looking at the interviews. So you are using triangulations of different researchers, and you are trying to account for this kind of intervention that you are having. So in this case, I believe that qualitative research is less naive, and it can be conducted in the wrong way. And obviously, being biasing the results really badly. This is why qualitative researchers should be extra careful. And this is why a lot of people also doesn't like conducting qualitative research. Maybe they know with qualitative research, they can go deeper into the phenomena, or they can better explain their specific research question, and they even have the means to actually perform all these interviews and find these people, because sometimes it's people that is hard to find, um, and they are going through this effort, but at the same time they have to go the extra mile and be careful with these kind of things. So it's additional task that you need to perform, and this is why a lot of people doesn't perform qualitative research. So my personal opinion is that just taking into consideration that this may happen, it's already something that if you put it in the mix, you will better understand the phenomena. For example, one of the things that I often worry about using quantitative methods and thinking measures are objective and they are universal, and then you are finding a sample, you are um, you are having a specific characteristics that you want in your sample, but then some people is willing to take your study and some people is not willing to take your study, and then some people are more likely to provide rightful information and some other people less likely, and you are not accounting for that. We believe that the measure will capture the phenomena and they will actually report the thing we want them to report. And so if you just um, believe or make the assumption that it is like this, you are missing some things that may be important and that you may capture with qualitative research. I don't know if I answer or if you have an additional question. Okay, so Enrico?
Yeah, thanks very much. That was a very interesting distinction. So far, I mean, I wasn't aware of this distinction in psychology or in experimental psychology yet. I always associated what you described as qualitative research with what I read in cultural studies or ethnology, and I always associated psychology with the quantitative method. So is that a recent development that you get like things like critical theory in psychology as well? Is it like a development of like the last 10 years, or because I always associated it with more like sociology, and I always felt like psychology was very positivistic in its approach.
Yeah,
And the second question would be, I would like from pure psychology, like I would like a nice example for this. So maybe could you like post your very favorite from any topic at all, like your very favorite qualitative paper, so that we could have a look at this, how this works. Because again, what you describe from a theory of science point of view, as philosophers, we are actually, when you threw these terms around in the beginning, I thought like, okay, what's this difference? I don't get it. But when you described it, like as a philosopher and somebody who used to study literature and cultural theory as well, I was very well aware of it, but not in the context of psychology, right? Or at least I didn't think that this was a thing in psychology.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And this is because it's not mainstream, right? And if you want to publish in the main journals in psychology, uh, you must use quantitative methods, and sometimes qualitative research, when they have some great findings, they get there, but it's like 8 quantitative and 1 qualitative, right? Because it's not that popular, but it's not new. It's not new. Uh, like it has been going for more than 30 years, especially in education. In education, there is a lot of qualitative research trying to understand learning. And so the thing is that if you are in a specific sector where quantitative analysis are favored, and you don't even know about these kind of methods that are there, and they're giving us great findings in psychology, right? So for example, in my case, I was trained in my bachelor as a general psychologist. So I was trained in different brands, and one of them was social psychology, and I had cultural psychology. So in these cases, we were looking about linguistics and how it changes the way we construct the world, the way we interpret the world, right? The way we make categorizations of the world. And then I moved to Canada to do my master in cognitive science. And over there, it was completely positivist. It was completely quantitative, the methods, and they were just making some assumptions that for me didn't make a lot of sense. I had to convince my supervisor to go my way regarding my research. And in this case, my research was mixed methods. So I do believe in the strengths of quantitative research, because you can get some facts, and you can start having an overview, an average of what is happening. So I like it, and then we will see more about this in the section specifically about quantitative research, because we will see that even though quantitative research have their weaknesses, specifically inferential statistics, but at the same time, with descriptive statistics, you can do a lot and you can gather a lot of information. So in my case, I was using mixed methods, and I was using descriptive statistics at the beginning, and then a qualitative method. And I had really interesting findings trying to find out about the categorization people made about science. I was talking about prototypes and how we make prototypes in our minds. So it is not new. It is not new. It's just not mainstream, and it is not as mainstream that I will tell you this. The whole module will be about research methods, and then because I know the US, Templeton, most researchers in the world, if you want to publish in Frontiers of Psychology, they will care about the quantitative methods. And then the module, we have like 12 sessions in quantitative research and just one more in qualitative research. So I just wanted to show you this is out there, and it makes sense. It makes sense regarding the nature of reality and how we are trying to actually unveil what is happening. A lot of the questions you had regarding personality growth, and can we actually measure it? What is personality growth, and is it something cultural? Is it cultural dependent? Right? These kind of questions should be answered with a different paradigm that is not positivism. And this is why we are having a hard time finding these specific variables, right? To put it in a box and trying to find the relationship among them. So it is not new. And I will definitely share with all of you some papers with very, very interesting findings regarding qualitative research. And I'm really happy you find it useful. I think this is really, really like a stone that you must have if you want to understand methods. And then you will have a better view of all the quantitative research because you can really see the limitations. So if they are sampling in a specific way and they are forgetting about a specific bias that may be present and they are just making the assumption nothing will happen, and then you have your data and the data makes no sense because you were missing at the beginning something that was important regarding the phenomenon. So this is why.
Thank you, Gina. May I very briefly follow up with just a brief remark?
Yeah.
I find it very reassuring that the same stuff is going on in psychology that's going on in philosophy, because in philosophy we have this big distinction you may have heard between sort of so-called analytical philosophy and continental philosophy. Well, in recent years this has somewhat broken down, but traditionally sort of analytic philosophy is sort of the equivalent, more or less, to what you would say is sort of the quantitative method. It stems from logical positive. You know, I simplify a lot here, but recently, sort of, I'm interested in sort of like breaking down this analytical continental divide because I'm sort of interested in analytic philosophy, but also in phenomenology and stuff like that. And you know, and these guys, like people like Husserl and Merleau-Ponty. And so I find it very interesting, like trying to combine the two and sort of see what happens there. And I'm very interested. The same stuff is because I always associated, again, psychology proper is sort of, especially experimental psychology, is like hardcore quantitative stuff. It's about statistics and it's about questionnaires, and you know, so I would be very interested if you could share some of your like favorite qualitative papers for me to browse through.
Definitely.
Sort of interested that this is all going on at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We have Catherine once again. Yeah, we cannot hear you.
Okay, so one thing is a question that I'm gonna ask in a second. The first thing is something simple that in case I think Hans left, but this struck me as relevant when you were telling him about some of the advantages and disadvantages of qualitative versus quantitative research. I think I've told you, Gina, about this book before, but in case anybody else is interested, I wrote it in the chat. It's called The Seduction of Quantification. And Sally Engelmary is a sociologist, so she's not a psychologist, but a lot of the arguments that she makes are very, could equally be made for psychology. And her main target in this book is the notion of indicators. So she argues that in a rush to kind of quantify things and come up with operationalizable variables that are like easily transferable across different contexts, so that we can get measures that apply, that we can compare different cultural contexts and different people. She says, and the UN and international organizations, they love these kinds of measures because they want to compare countries and populations. And Sally Engel-Merry gives several different case studies of research that she's done that show that a lot of these kind of indicators that are very quantified and very favored in international organizations can actually be very, very patchy under the surface. So a lot of questions arise about, for example, if you want to measure like domestic violence across cultures to come up with a worldwide indicator of where it's prevalent. Well, domestic violence in one country is going to be very different from domestic violence in another country, depending on the cultural norms and what counts as domestic, and the relationships between people. Does in one country they might count only people living together as in perpetrating violence on each other as domestic violence, whereas another country they might go out and kind of in their culture they might count people who don't live together but maybe are estranged from each other, and these kinds of differences don't really filter up to the level of the indicator. And another thing is that in certain contexts the data is simply not available because you don't have the people on the ground to gather it because of poverty or infrastructure problems or various assumptions about institutions that kind of don't exist or that exist in one way but not another. And these differences in even the level of the gathering of data that feed into these quantifiers do not cannot be seen at the level of the quantifier, the indicator itself. And she gives all kinds of examples of stuff like this that show how how there are some very big limits to quantifying methodology, which is that it kind of helped me understand the case really well, that qualitative research really is a very important piece of the puzzle. And I would like to learn more than 2 sessions worth about it. But
yeah, I will definitely leave you some readings about that. But I'm sure you are all over the allure of statistical methods and ANOVAs and regressions, and we will have some sessions about that. But we can still be flexible and trying to find better ways of exploring these methods. And obviously they are really rich, right? Just ethnography or ethnomethodology, like you can find whole books just describing the steps you must take. So it's really complex methodologies. And obviously this course, it's a bit limited because we only have 1 year. Some of these courses in universities, already taking statistics takes years and 12 subjects in order to get around. So here we are just looking at our overview, but in a critical way, right? I am trying to extract the most important things that you must know are happening in psychological science for you to be well informed and make informed decisions about it. So this is the whole goal. And I already take note of this book that you were mentioning. Sounds like me, like even though it's not talking specifically about psychology, but it's a big issue that in psychology it's already discussed. There are a lot of research in psychology that are already taking notes of all these kind of limitations that the quantitative approach has. And it is important for you to know them because sometimes we assume like we have specific stereotypes of what science should look like and how psychological science should look like, right? So we already discussed here about the allure of neuroscience, for example, or fancy statistical tests, and it is more likely to be published if you do these kind of things. But my advice for you as researchers in psychology will be maybe going towards mixed methods. So you can have the sciencey look in your research, but at the same time going deeper into the phenomena and not falling short with the descriptions that you are making. So that will be my advice. Okay, so
I did have an additional question.
Yeah.
If we have just a little time, um, this is
Yeah, I think so.
okay. I shouldn't take too long. It's this is about the difference between like the positive. Oh yeah, right. The paradigms, positivism versus like constructivism, for example. Let's just take those as examples. Those are they strike, I've encountered them before in talking with psychologists, and I never quite understood what was going on. And here's the reason why I find these paradigms very kind of problematic. I think they mix things that need to be kept apart. Um, so positivism comes apparent, so it kind of believes in objective facts, whereas constructivism does not believe in objective facts. Positivism uses quantitative methodology because that's how you discover objective facts, whereas constructivism uses, more qualitative methodology because there are no objective facts. Facts are only value laden. This seems to me to be kind of mixing, like I can believe that there is an objective reality out there and still use qualitative methodology, right? I can just believe that there are lots of different perspectives on that objective reality, but I don't have to deny that there are facts.
This is critical realism, and they are using both. Like there is a reality out there, but the way that reality is for me, it's constructed. So it changes in different individuals. But if there is some specific reality out there that I can capture, but I will capture only the perception of the individuals.
Okay. So is critical realism like a fourth paradigm?
Is the third one? Is the third one?
Critical theory. Okay.
Yeah,
So that falls under
it's
critical theory.
critical realism. Yeah, and this is, you can read a bit more about it in the documents that I left you in Moodle, but it's about this. So as you are actually doing the exercise that I wanted you to do at the beginning. It's like asking yourself, what is my stand? How do I believe reality is? What is the nature of reality, and how can knowledge actually be gathered, right? What are the properties? And then you devise your methods. So you are doing it, Catherine. You are trying to find the way you see reality, and you are there. You are in the middle, right? There are not many realities, and none of them is actually happening. It's not constructivism per se or pure, but also you don't go to positivism. So somewhere in the middle could be this kind of critical theory.
So, but it seems to me that these paradigms go with the assumption that if you believe, whatever you believe about the nature of reality, that like determines how you can research reality. Whereas it seems to me that what you believe about the kind of metaphysical nature of facts and stuff is kind of independent of what kinds of questions you ask. Like, I don't have to know if there's a reality outside my mind, or I don't have to have an opinion about whether there's a reality outside my mind in order to say, yeah, I'm going to do quantitative research, or I'm going to do qualitative or mixed research. Like, it seems to me that this kind of metaphysical question, like, I don't need to build that into my research necessarily.
Well, it depends on the kind of involvement you want to have with your research, because you can always assume a specific information you gather is valid in a specific framework, right? Which could be quantitative if you choose to, because even though you don't ascribe to that paradigm completely, but you believe that the specific methods can answer your research methods. So even though you don't ascribe, you can use it. Well, in this case, I will say that it depends on how much you are involved with your own work, right? If you are doing something you believe it will give you the truth, the better way to assess the truth, in this case, you must take into considerations your own beliefs. But if you want to make systematic observations and use a specific scientific method to that, and then you don't need to ascribe to these specific beliefs. I don't know if I am answering your question. So you are right. You don't have to ascribe, but methodologically you do have to be congruent, right? If you are picking a positivist or neo-positivist paradigm, then you should use quantitative or mixed methods, because you can also use mixed, and you should use quantitative methodology. So you should be congruent, right? Even though you are scribe or not to those beliefs.
I think this is a longer conversation than the 9 minutes we have remaining will permit. And I think, but it's helpful for me to hear how you are talking about these matters. And I have to figure out for myself how I would want to sort those various considerations in my own philosophical kind of language. But that's very helpful to hear how you're talking about these matters. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Enrico, I think we have a hands on.
Yeah, I had very similar questions to Catherine's regarding sort of like which basic metaphysics were you apply versus what your research interests are. It seems to me like in qualitative research, very often you can just, your research interest is just a different one. You are interested in what perspectives different groups have on a specific issue. But there was one in your response, there's of course one difference in whether you adopt a realist paradigm or whether you adopt a purely constructivist paradigm. And that's like the possibility, like if you're interested in the possibility that certain perspectives can be wrong, right? So then you're adopting a realist paradigm because you then make a distinction between the views and the world as it is, right? So it seems to me as soon as you are interested to go beyond a purely descriptive approach of what people are thinking, and you ask yourself, well, is there actually a right and wrong here, right? And not only from my perspective, but simpliciter. Then it seems to me you have to think hard about like your metaphysical presuppositions, as it were. Yeah.
Thank you, Enrico. Okay, well, we should close today's session. Thank you for being here, and see you. I think we have a session next Friday, right? See you next Friday. Have a nice weekend, all of you.